Welcome to today's explainer. Have you ever just looked around and wondered how the natural world manages to keep going year after year, century after century, without just completely breaking down? Well, today we're going to look at nature not just as a random collection of plants and animals, but as an ecosystem engine. An engine that literally fuels itself, manages its own waste, and even performs its own repairs. Okay, let's dive right into this by asking a pretty massive question. Is it possible that everything around us is actually operating like a highly complex mechanical engine? Because an ecosystem, it isn't just a static background, right? It's incredibly dynamic. It is designed to run indefinitely. So let's pop the hood and see exactly how the parts of this beautiful machine work together. Here's our owner's manual for today. We're going to cover 1. Nature as a giant machine. 2. Energy as the real fuel. 3. Pollution and how it jams the system. 4. Nature's ultimate recycling program. And finally, 5. Succession, which is the machine's self-repair mechanism. All right, Section 1. Nature, a giant machine, the basic functions. Now, just like any engine, an ecosystem needs an underlying architecture to actually function. So the absolutely crucial point here is that this entire biological machine rests securely on just 3 operational pillars. Think of energy flow as the gasoline or electricity that makes the wheels turn. Then, the nutrient cycle. That's your recycling department, ensuring materials are reused infinitely. And finally, ecological succession is the built-in repair protocol that kicks in when the system gets damaged. These 3 things combined, that's what guarantees the wheels of nature keep turning. Moving on to Section 2, energy, the real fuel. Powering the system. So what exactly powers all these moving parts? Let's inspect the fuel that drives every single action in the natural world. Now, there's a huge contrast between what we learn in school and what actually happens out in the wild. While textbooks often show this really simple linear food chain, straight line of who eats whom, the reality of the engine is a deeply interconnected food web. One single animal can be part of so many different chains simultaneously. It's like a massive puzzle where turning just one gear immediately affects dozens of others. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates nature's extreme efficiency. It literally wastes nothing. Energy flows down 2 separate tracks. You've got the grazing track, which we all know, plants eaten by herbivores, eaten by carnivores. But there's also a massive detritus track. This secondary engine runs entirely on dead organisms and decaying matter. So, dead material isn't trash, it's premium fuel for a whole different set of gears. But here's the catch with energy. It is a one-way street. Energy is heavily lost as heat at every single step up the ladder. When an herbivore eats a plant, most of that energy burns off just keeping the animal warm and moving around. This massive loss of energy at each tier is exactly why a food chain engine stalls out after just 5 or 6 levels. There simply isn't enough fuel left to support a predator that eats the predator that eats the predator. All right, Section 3, pollution, jamming the system. The threat of wrong fuel. Because what happens when our perfect machine intakes something it just cannot process? The first glitch we encounter is bioaccumulation. This is where a localized gear in the engine gets all gunked up by absorbing a toxin directly from the environment. Now, for this to happen, the pollutant needs to be long-lasting, mobile, and fat-soluble. It enters an animal's body and, instead of being flushed out, it just sits there. It slowly accumulates in the fatty tissues over the organism's entire lifespan. But the real villain here is biomagnification. Because energy demands that a predator eats many prey animals, the poison acts like a snowballing explosive. A small fish has a little toxin. A big fish eats 10 small fish and gets a bigger dose, and then an eagle eats 10 big fish and gets a massive dose. This culminates in deadly concentrations for top predators. This is exactly what we historically saw with the pesticide DDT, which nearly wiped out entire species by jamming up the top levels of the food web. Let's move to Section 4, nature's ultimate recycling program, reusing the exhaust. Exiting that darker territory, let's explore the engine's spectacular, infinite recycling department. Because unlike energy, which burns up and escapes as heat, the actual physical materials in nature are never truly lost. Nutrients never die. They're just continually repurposed through biogeochemical cycles. But they are processed at 2 starkly different speeds. You have the perfect cycles. These use the atmosphere, like air and water moving lightning fast. And then there are the imperfect cycles. These are incredibly sluggish, mostly because the nutrients are locked deep inside sedimentary rocks and the Earth's crust, taking centuries or even millennia to recycle. Let's look at one of the fast ones. The nitrogen cycle operates as this flawless, high-speed relay race run entirely by microscopic bacterial mechanics. Plants can't breathe nitrogen directly, so specific bacteria pull it from the air and convert it. Then they pass the baton to other bacteria that turn it into plant food. Finally, a completely different cleanup crew of bacteria takes the leftovers and converts them right back into atmospheric gas. It's just pure, synchronized teamwork. Unfortunately, humans have kinda decided to tamper with the relay race. We're currently manufacturing and pumping out massive amounts of industrial nitrogen from our factories, and we are severely overloading this delicate, perfectly timed natural cycle. The system just cannot recycle it fast enough. So the excess nitrogen turns into a potent pollutant, triggering destructive acid rain and sparking explosive, toxic algal blooms that literally suffocate entire lakes. But when the system is working natively, its efficiency is just staggering. Seriously, prepare to have your mind blown. Because of this ultimate recycling loop, 97% of every living body on Earth is built from just 5 elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. What this really means for you is that the atoms currently making up your physical body are the exact same recycled atoms that once powered the dinosaurs millions of years ago. How cool is that? Meanwhile, we also have to consider the slow hardware components of the engine, things like phosphorus and sulfur. Phosphorus normally stays hidden deep inside rocks, only slowly releasing over millions of years as tectonic plates naturally shift. But again, humans are intervening. We're aggressively mining these slow reserves, dangerously fast-tracking them out of their natural rhythm and disrupting the intricate balance of the entire machine. Bringing us to Section 5, Succession, the machine's self-repair, fixing the damage. This is arguably the engine's most resilient feature. Its built-in ecological repair protocol that activates following a catastrophic breakdown, like a fire, a flood, or a volcanic eruption. When everything is destroyed, nature simply doesn't give up. The repair works in systematic, predictable stages. It always starts with the pioneer community. These are incredibly tough, robust microbes and tiny plants that can survive on basically nothing. They prepare the ground. Over time, as conditions improve, new species arrive, eventually finalizing into what we call a climax community. That is your perfectly balanced, mature, and stable ecosystem. Now, the timeline for this repair varies drastically based on the severity of the damage. If an area is wiped totally clean, down to bare rock with zero soil, like say after a lava flow, it triggers primary succession. And that takes hundreds and hundreds of years just to manufacture new dirt. But if a forest burns down and the soil remains intact, that triggers secondary succession. Since the foundation is still there, the machine can rebuild very, very fast. What's truly fascinating is what actually drives this change. This repair protocol can be autogenic, meaning it's triggered internally by the organisms themselves, biologically updating their own environment to make it perfect for the next wave of species. Or it can be allogenic, externally forced by massive, ongoing physical events like storms and floods, pushing the environment into a new state. Either way, the repair goes on. So we've seen how brilliant, complex, and beautifully balanced this ecosystem engine is. But I want to leave you with this sobering thought today. As we continually tamper with the fuel lines, as we override the recycling programs with industrial waste, and as we block the natural repair protocols, what is the end game? Will this glorious engine ultimately shatter completely, or will it terrifyingly evolve into a new, unfamiliar machine just to survive us? Think about that next time you step outside. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Explainer, and as always, keep your curiosity running.